Hello everyone, welcome to this video lecture on case study. So in this video, I should be talking about the important things that you need to know about case study writing. Before I proceed to my actual discussion, allow me to give credits to the owner of this presentation. So I am using this PowerPoint because I love the contents. They are very comprehensive and well substantiated. So I believe that if I use this PowerPoint presentation, it will be easier for me to make you students understand the important concepts related to case study writing. So let me proceed by defining first what case study. So Yin in 1994 states that a case study is an empirical inquiry that investigates a contemporary phenomenon within its real-life context, especially when the boundaries between phenomenon and context are not clearly evident. So the important thing to remember here is that when we write a case study, we write because we know or we want to know more about the phenomenon being studied or being investigated. And at the same time, we want to understand the context of that phenomenon. According to Stake in 1995, a case is an integrated system. And to explain further on that, later on, I'll be showing you further discussions which can really support why a case is considered to be an integrated system. Miriam in 1988 highlights that a qualitative case study is an intensive, holistic description and analysis of a single instance, phenomenon, or social unit. Now, unlike phenomenology, which focuses on the lived experiences of the participants, a case study is narrowed down, meaning it's zeroed in. The focus of case study primarily is on a single case only. Okay? So if you want to explore a number of cases, it cannot be done using case study method. The single most defining characteristics of case study lies in delimiting the object of the study, which is considered as the case. It is a bounded system. That's according to Smith in 1978. Now, one thing to remember when we talk about case study is that it focuses on one case only or one phenomenon only. And then the methodology of the case study itself should be geared towards investigating that phenomenon and looking for answers to questions related to the context of that phenomenon. Why did that phenomenon happen? Or why is that phenomenon still happening? Okay, so these are the guide questions that you need to ask when conducting a case study. So furthermore, a case study is a study of individual, program, event, group, intervention, or community. Or it could also be a study of an aspect of any of these mentioned aspects. Think of the case as a phenomenon of some sort occurring in a bounded context. That's according to Miles and Huberman in 1994. And in conducting a case study, an in-depth understanding of the situation and the meaning for those involved must be evident. Case study does not claim any particular methods for data collection or data analysis. When you say case study, you really cannot say that it should only be qualitative data collection procedure that should be used. Or it could be the otherwise, quantitative. Okay? It depends. Any or all methods for gathering data, from testing to interviewing, can actually be used in data analysis. We are actually focusing more on the insight, discovery, and interpretation rather than testing the hypothesis. So when we conduct a case study, our primary goal here is to gain insights. As we conduct a thorough research about the topic or the case at hand, our primary goal here is to make sure that we as the researchers are getting sufficient information for us to be enlightened about the case at hand. And through that, it will be easier for us to, conduct the study and at the same time provide well-substantiated discussions to explain the case further. So, looking at here, we can see that there is a big difference in terms of the use of qualitative data collection and the use of quantitative data collection in a case study. So, when you use qualitative data collection, there is really a high chance or high opportunity for you to elicit more information regarding the case at hand. And on one hand, there is low opportunities for quantitative data collection. Now, if we look at this one, we can see that when we conduct a case study, there is a need for rich explanation because it's qualitative primarily. You need to discuss more about the case at hand. So you will have to substantiate more about the case, discuss comprehensively. So there is a need for rich explanation. You also need to look at the complexity of the issue. Of course, if you want to understand the phenomenon at hand, you need to look at it, the case or the issue at hand, with complexity so that you will have more logical understanding of why or how the case happened. There could also be difficulty around obtaining information, most especially if it's, for example, if you're using qualitative data collection such as, let's say, focus group discussion or interview. If you use interview only for case study, well, the data will be limited, okay? You will or you might experience scarcity of data because you are dependent or reliable only on a single data collection method. Unlike when you use a variety of data collection methods, for example, you employ triangulation, meaning you use 3 data collection methods for you to elicit a number of data sufficient enough to discuss the case at hand. So there will really be difficulty, most especially if you are not diligent enough in conducting the data gathering process. And lastly, there could also be lack of information about the topic because some topics or some cases are underexplored. Meaning, since they are cases, meaning some researchers or academics might not have fully explored yet the case at hand, or some researchers might have no interest in the conduct of such. Science is often misrepresented as the body of knowledge acquired by performing replicated controlled experiments on the laboratory. So this is commonly the projection of, or a projection for a science, for science. Actually, science is something much broader than that. It involves the acquisition of reliable knowledge about the world. And so, we could say that in order for us to acquire reliable knowledge, not only laboratory experiments have to be conducted. In some fields, such as chemistry and molecular biology, replicated controlled experiments in the laboratory are feasible, and they actually provide by far the most reliable means to acquire knowledge, where it is impossible to manipulate. Experimentally, one has no choice except to renounce laboratory experiments in favor of natural ones. So the natural ones here point out to the data collection methods which involve understanding the phenomenon through observation, asking questions from the field, things like this. Now, if you want to really understand a case thoroughly, well, you don't need to conduct laboratory or a battery of laboratory tests or experiments just for you to come up with a conclusion or an inference about the case. Because the best way for you to gather pieces of information helpful in understanding the case at hand is through using methods which will elicit sufficient amount or number of data for your study or for your case study. So we know that to research means to seek, right? And research means seeking again. And when we talk about case, we're talking about an instance or an example. And when we talk about study, it's an attentive scrutiny. So when we talk about case study, it's an attentive scrutiny of an instance or example. So when we write a case study, that means we are looking at the investigation of a certain instance or a case, a phenomenon, or an example. That's the best way for us to understand how case study works. So a case study is actually a story focused on a particular instance or example. It could be a story about who, okay, about what, when, where, why, and how. For example, when you want to study more about the beneficiaries of SAP, okay, you can write a case study about that one, but you should not look at the experiences in totality of those beneficiaries. Instead, You look at one aspect only, so you need to single out, choose the best aspect that you want to explore, and make it as your case, okay? Make it as your focus. So that's how you choose a topic for a case study. Or it could also be what? For example, SAP, okay? Or the procedure or the process in availing SAP. Or when? During the pandemic. Where? In a specific place, okay? Or why do you want to conduct that one? Maybe because previous studies reveal that there have been a number of problems encountered in the distribution of subsidies, okay, or allowances. So it depends on the case. It is a story worth investigating and reporting. So that's why it is a case, because you need to understand more about it. And for you to understand more about it, you need to conduct diligent investigation or research about the case and its background. A case study is intensive, holistic, okay? It's a description, okay? A well-substantiated discussion of a single unit or bounded, okay? It can be integrated with other qualitative research approaches. For example, when you want to conduct an ethnographic case study, okay? Or when you want to conduct a phenomenological case study. So if you want to weave experiences with a case, okay, looking at the lived experiences of the people together with the case, okay, or the problem being encountered by the people or that group. So it could be a phenomenological case study. What's important here is that you know how to build on the theory, okay? And on building the theory, it's very vital that you carefully choose the theory that will support the case. Because again, as mentioned, there could be difficulties or challenges with, let's say, the related literature or studies that could be used as backup or to corroborate your discussion. So you need to consider these things as well. According to Creswell in 1998, a case study is an exploration of a bounded system or a case or multiple cases and other examples over time through in-depth data collection involving multiple sources of information rich in data. So again, when you conduct case study, interview is not enough. It's highly suggested that there are a number of data collection procedures so that you will really understand the case at hand. For example, you want to know more about the challenges of poor families during the pandemic. Of course, you cannot identify the challenges only by asking the people, okay, or the poor people or the group of poor people. You need to have enough data collection methods used in your data gathering process so as to make sure that you will also elicit enough amount of information to be used in your discussion and interpretation later on. Because if you will rely, let's say, on interview only, the challenge there will be, it's more on the narratives or the experiences of the people. How about the things that you could observe, those that are or will not be shared by the people whom you interviewed, right? Or how about other documents which could have led to why those people experienced such a case? So you need to consider everything. That's why gather as many evidence as possible for you to explain the case thoroughly or substantially. A bounded system is bounded in time and place and is the case that is the object of study. Creswell in 1998 emphasized that one. So for example, if a certain phenomenon is happening during this period, let's say pandemic, or if a certain phenomenon is happening in this certain geographical location, okay, let's say only in Davao City or in Jensan or in region 11 only. So you need to consider also these factors because for you to understand the case at hand, you also need to consider other factors. Factors other than those that are visibly seen, for example, in a specific geographical location, okay? Or those that are specifically experienced during that specific time, okay? These are the things that you need to consider when conducting a case study. Now, in general, case studies are the preferred strategy when how or why questions are being posed. So if you would like to know the hows and the whys of something, then a case study is going to be instrumental. When the investigator has little control over events, and when the focus is on contemporary phenomenon within some real-life context. So a case study would be the perfect tool in gathering understanding or in being enlightened in this case. A case study is the study of the particularity and complexity of a single case, coming to understand its complexity within a single case. So again, I'd like to point out, it focuses on one case or on a single case only. So examples of bounded systems or phenomena that are of case study interest are, for example, person. Why is this person experiencing so much difficulty in the time of pandemic? Okay, so that could be a case study interest. Another one is the process. Let's say, why is it that in the distribution of SAP, for example, there should be long queues or there should be a lot of documentary requirements before a person could avail of the program? So the process could be the case there. So you need to study about it, gather more facts about the process so that you can really understand and explain the case at hand. Or it could also be the program. Let's say the SAP itself as a program, okay? An event, could be an intervention, a group, organization, community, or generally an issue. But you need to narrow down or zero into a particular issue only. That is the best way for you to study a certain case. Now, what is case study form? So there are different forms for a case study. It could be exploratory, it could be descriptive, it could be explanatory or causal. So if you want to look on the causes of the case, then explanatory case study must be or should be the case study form. You could also have the intrinsic, meaning you look at the uniqueness, okay? It could also be instrumental if you are focusing more on the issue or if you focus more on the resolution of the issue. It could also be collective, meaning multiple case studies could be conducted as well if you want to have a cross-link, okay, or a look at the cross-link or the overlapping themes or overlapping information or evidence between the two things or maybe the two or more cases. And then it could also be historical. If you want to study a case that happened in the past, that's possible. You could have ethnographic case study. So if it has something to do with a certain group of individuals, okay, looking not only on the culture or language, but also on the experiences or the case or experiences that could have an impact to the case. And then you also have evaluative if you want to evaluate a certain program, let's say, okay, identifying the opportunities or threats, things like this. It could also be topical. If it focuses on a certain topic only, it could be multi-site. For example, you'd like to understand the case of poor families during pandemic, not only in Davao, but also in nearby cities, in other nearby cities such as Jensen and Digos. Okay, that could also be a case study interest or a case study form. Or it could also be within site only, within a specific geographical location only. Okay? Now, for exploratory case study, for example, we have here campus response to a student gunman. Okay, gunman. So this one is based on no theories, models, and variables. It's basically context emerging. So you'd like to study more of the context of this one, okay, without considering theories or models. We also have explanatory, which is heuristic in nature. It describes the course of events. For example, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, wherein the reasons are explained, okay? What happened, why, so that's explanatory in nature. We also have descriptive, for example, Street Corner Society by Whyte in 1943, 1955, describing a subculture. Result is a thick description of this subculture. So it's more on describing what the culture is or what the case is for that certain culture. Okay? Now, for case study form, it must illustrate the complexities of a situation. So there are things that you also need to consider in choosing the form of your case study. Okay, but here in our institution, we understand that there is already a specific format or template used or observed when writing case studies. But you need to evaluate and re-evaluate still the things that should be targeted by the case study form, okay, whether or not the way your case study is written is effective enough to make sure that the case will be well discussed. For example, if it illustrates the complexities of a situation, so it's very important that the complexities of the issue should be discussed thoroughly. Okay? Second one, show the influence of personalities on the issue. For example, if there are people or other external factors such as group of people or individuals who could have an impact on the case, okay, or on the situation. Show the influence of the passage of time on the issue. For example, deadlines, funding, change of personnel, okay, because we know that the case could be different from one time to another, okay. Include vivid material. For example, you have their evidences such as quotations, okay, citations, clippings, interviews, newspaper articles. You need to obtain information from many sources. As mentioned, there should be enough number of data collection methods to be used. Ideally, you employ triangulation so that it will be very effective for you to, interpret, analyze, and discuss the data at hand. It's also significant to spell out differences of opinions. So when we talk about case study, you should not be subjective in discussing, let's say, the case at hand. You should not be biased as well. Because the tendency is that if you manipulate the description of the case, you will mislead the readers or the audience. Okay? For example, originally, this program or this case should be like this. It should appear like this. But because of your manipulation, people have begun, changing their understanding or even their mind about that thing, okay, about the case at hand. So you need to spell out differences of opinions, and you need to present information in many ways. It should not only be interview responses. You could also use other presentation means to, present the data or to project the data after careful data collection. There is uniqueness in case study. What it can reveal about a phenomenon, knowledge we would otherwise not have access to. Okay, it's because of case study. We cannot really understand what a case is unless we conduct case study, right? Case studies are thus an intensive, holistic description of analysis of a single entity, phenomenon, or a social union. Okay, they could be exploratory, explanatory, or descriptive, or any of those that I mentioned a while ago. Okay, now what is case study context? What is this context that we are talking about? As mentioned a while ago, it's important that you identify the phenomenon, right? There should be one case or one phenomenon, and at the same time, there should be that context. The context here refers to the circumstances within which a particular event occurs. Okay, it could be the physical context, the social context, historical, or economic context. For example, SAP. The case of SAP could be different. The case of SAP during pandemic could be different from the case of SAP implemented pre-pandemic. Okay, you get my point? It could be economic context, or it could also be historical context or social context. So it depends. It really depends. Case studies are context-based inquiries. Okay, you need to understand, dig deeper into the context so that you can provide more discussions about the case. The richness of the context is a major part of the study, because if you will not make the context rich, then you will have troubles later on identifying what the case really is all about. Let's say you gathered only 2 pages of interview transcripts, and you think that those 2 pages are enough to answer your questions about the case. Okay? I believe that it's really insufficient. It's not enough, considering that, let's say you are talking about a very complicated case, which requires a number of evidences or facts to support or corroborate your discussion. Okay? Discussion of the context, which I'm referring to here. Many data collections need to be employed in gathering case studies or in gathering information for case studies. Now, the case study is the method of choice when the phenomenon under study is not readily distinguishable from its context. So if you think that you could not really contextualize a phenomenon happening or a phenomenon that happened in the past, well, you have to use case study. Case studies help us to understand processes of events, projects, and programs, and to discover context characteristics that will shed light on an issue or object. Now, how do we design case study? A research design describes how resources and procedures were organized into a coherent plan for collecting and interpreting data that address the research questions. That is, how the research was conducted. Now, in this case study accommodates a wide range of design decisions and plans involving sites and samples. You could also have data collection and analysis techniques, role of the researcher, timelines, and presentation and interpretation. So it's very important that you strengthen the design of your case study, because this will actually tell or give you the direction as to how you should conduct the case study itself. If there are loopholes in the design of your study, the tendency will be there will also be loopholes in the data gathering process. And so you have to make sure, double check the case study design that you will be choosing as to how you will be crafting the entire methodology, okay? So that at the end of the day, or at the end of your data gathering, you will encounter no problem, okay? Colloquially, a research design is a logical plan for getting from here, questions to be answered, to there, or the answers. Now, we know this one. And so, when we talk about components of design, we are talking about important aspects, such as, of course, you need to have a research question or a set of research questions. You also need to have your propositions, okay, your claims. It could be presented by having the rationale of your research. Or if any, it's unit of analysis, okay, the approaches that you will use or the data analysis treatment that you will be using, the logic linking the data to the propositions, and the criteria for implementing the findings. Now, there are types of case studies that you can conduct. First one is the single case studies, holistic, meaning you look at the totality of the case at hand, okay, and it's only for a single case. We also have embedded, several units of analysis, okay, meaning there are different stages that you need to undergo so that you would have more and more data that will support your discussion later on. And of course, another familiar type of case study is the multiple case study. Okay, two or more, it could be holistic or embedded. Okay, and then usually they check it using cross approaches, okay, or cross-checking approaches, so as to make sure that the dominant themes, okay, of the case or the dominant facts of the case are really presented. So what are the data collection techniques in a case study research? Well, you can use observation. Okay, you can observe your participants. You could also analyze documents. For example, journal entries or diaries. So you can use these as additional discussions or evidence for your discussion. You can also have photo or videos. Okay, you could even have, let's say, photo presentation wherein you show the participant a photo and then let that participant share about that picture or photo. You could also have mapping. You could check on the artifacts. You conduct interviews, okay, key informant interviews. And of course, you have the focus group discussion. Now, again, I'd like to reiterate that when you conduct a case study, it will be ideal, it will be highly recommended if there is variety in terms of data collection, okay? You need to remember that one. Okay, so the next topic will be on case study protocol. I think I need to end my discussion here. I hope that you are enlightened now with regard to case study and how it should be conducted. I hope that you are clarified as well as to why there is a need for us to focus on one case only for single case studies and multiple cases for multiple case studies. Now, if you have any question, kindly post it on the open forum, and then later on, I'll answer your question. Thank you very much for listening to this video discussion.